This is Jocelyn Matthews. I'm here today with Yingrong Zhao, an engineer here. Hey, Yingrong.
Hey, Jocelyn. I am on the performance and metrics team at Storage. We're primarily working on improving our performance from the user's perspective and how to make our download, upload, delete, and listing operations faster and be on the bar with AWS S3. We are currently, I am working on improving the delete performance, and we have been coming up with different kind of designs and different, like trying to match with the AWS S3 API, try to make it user friendly, all the fun stuff. Some of my teammates are also working on trying to improve the throughput, our storage nodes, to make sure that the throughput of the network is capable of handling more customers in the network. I actually started from coding bootcamp and did some of the front-end work, but I was always interested in back-end and distributed system in general. So luckily, I know one of my coworkers that is working at Storage at the time. So I talked to her, and she kind of introduced me to the company and helped me to got a job here. And then that's how I started working on the network.
Thanks. I think more and more people are coming from the bootcamp background over recent years. It seems to me that a lot of the bootcamps really focus on front end, and some of them do full stack. What was it like for you you sort of came in and you did this really intense course, right, where you're learning all of this stuff, and then to transfer that knowledge into working on a distributed system? How much of it mapped over, and what kinds of concepts did you find that you had to encounter as new? Were there specific problems or concepts that you had to solve to take those skills that you obtained at bootcamp and apply to a product like the Tardigrade platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of the technical concepts that I learned during bootcamp doesn't really apply to what I am currently working on day to day, but it's the mindset that you learn while you solve a technical problem is the thing that follows you throughout your career. You learn how to approach kind of abstract issue, and then how to basically digest it and turn into a more concrete requirement that you can solve one at a time instead of try to tackle a whole problem head on all at once. I think that's something that has helped me throughout my journey of my positions.
You've got this background where you're trained to do one particular thing. And from the outside, maybe it looks like, okay, like you're an engineer now, like go hit it, This means infinite different things. Like there's no such thing as just an engineer as this blanket term, even though we talk about it that way. But there are so many different kinds of engineers and so many different ways to be proficient. You're being put into this role as an engineer. It's a very different kind of engineering than maybe what you were formally trained in. I guess the question would be just around that. What is the difference between distributed and front end? Like because they're not the same thing, right?
Right. I think when for the first question, I think for anyone who is currently or just coming out of bootcamp, I think the most important thing is the ability to learn new things, because whatever that you have learned at your bootcamp, maybe it's sufficient for you to get your first job, but you will definitely learn new things and have to solve problems that you don't have the knowledge of currently. But the ability to learn and to discover, to research for an answer for an unknown issue that's something that will be happening throughout your career constantly. That's kind of the job of an engineer, is to get a problem and find, not necessarily find a solution, but find a way, a path towards the solution. I think that's the part that, even though I started with front end, but I was able to make the transition to back end and work on a more complicated problem, is because I think, of course, it's scary at first because I didn't know anything, but the willingness to learn is what really helped me to tackle all this new domain. And then I think, in terms of how distributed system is different from doing front end, is that there's more things to that you have to consider. For example, that when you are doing front end work, you are basically just you don't really necessarily need to think about concurrency. You don't really need to think about how other people is going to, I guess, accept your teammate or someone who is also working on the same code base as you are. But there's not really anyone is going to use to interact with your code. It's the user interact with your code through a UI. But with distributed system, at least for storage, we are distributed cloud storage. So any code that we write, especially the client-facing code, we need to make sure that we're exposing the correct interface so that the user of our product is able to get the correct information for all of their operations. So I think there's a lot more things to be considered while doing development work than writing a UI.
Thanks. I totally agree. I know that you're working on deletes, that you're also looking at other solutions in the industry and looking at how they perform, how we perform. Have you noticed any trends around how performance of various products is changing? Do you see any new things coming up that you're sort of keeping in mind as you make your decisions around how to code?
Yeah, since we are trying to be S3 compatible, so we reference their API design like during our development process a whole lot. So for us, we have been doing the delete, at least currently, the deletion happens when the user makes the request. So when users say, I want to delete an object, it's actually being deleted in the backend. I think there are other cloud providers that instead of actually deleting the object during the request, they would just mark the object as about to be deleted, or mark it as, oh, there's a request for this object to be deleted, but not actually delete the object in the database. So that's how they kind of have a good performance from the user's perspective. Especially a lot of centralized solution, they're able to just ask the database once, mark the object to be deleted, and then respond to the user very quickly. But for us, since we're a distributed system, the data is not actually being stored in one central place. So when we delete an object, we have to connect to all different nodes in the network that has the data for that object. So it adds a lot of network latency. It adds a lot more complexity in the operation. And we have been trying to find a better design that provide a better user experience, to have a quicker response to the user as well, to prevent that, if there's a lot of delete happen, the network is not going to be overwhelmed. So that's extra complexity added for us comparing to a centralized solution.
Yeah, definitely complex. Obviously I talked to lots of us here like that are working at the company. And a theme that tends to come up over and over is that we sort of started out in the harshest circumstances possible.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, there are some solutions out there where it works pretty well most of the time. And then once you start to get out into the edges and the borders and you want to do something that is non-standard, or you need to operate under conditions that are like crisis situations, or like, the sky is falling and it's burning rain. Whereas we kind of went about it the other way around. And because we have this network of people who are potentially untrusted, and because of the decentralized nature, that we kind of start from the harshest conditions and almost like work our way inwards to the center of the circle, instead of like, starting in the center and moving out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that applies to what you do as well?
Yeah, I do think so, because in a lot of systems, the network latency is something that kills performance. So, but that's kind of the nature of the distributed system, is that you have to work around that factor, because it's the distance between Asia and Europe is not going to change no matter what. That you have the request, the data has to travel that far physically. So every time when we do a design, we definitely have to, the first thing that has to be considered is how do we make sure that that network latency isn't going to have a huge impact on our performance.